as I remember it, he was instrumental in developing a facade easement program, which funded taking a facade that had been badly butchered on an existing building that had built in 1750 or something, you know. And underneath is the bones of a beautiful historic building that all he needed was some backing to help recall at least the idea of that original building.
A lot of people would say, well, it's about time we get rid of that piece of junk. And then you'd have to say, take another look. You know, it's not a piece of junk. It has some problems. It's like somebody getting old. Front Street was, virtually half of it was missing. I mean, it was just a pretty sad looking thing. I said, I think we ought to start with the hardest one first, because if it's a derelict and we can salvage that, then it proves something. You know, I mean, this axis began to take on a new life. I worked very hard producing a scheme for the whole urban renewal. I can rather enjoy buildings that are kind of in a fairly decrepit state, because I can see them. I can see what there was. I mean, it's easy to understand the buildings. Either you try to repair it or you don't. The buildings that were going to be renovated, for the most part, there were 16, I think. Oscar Pageant did several.
It was a mess. There were a mixture of things too. There were a lot of buildings that had the then early 1940s sort of contemporary looks of putting on some plastic facings and contemporary things, and were kind of awful. And all of those went eventually. And a good example would be the building next to the Salem 5 was a bullfinch building, which was wood frame, and it was in terrible shape, and it had contemporary affectations on it of one type or another. It would have cost a lot of money to have tried to make it to what it was originally, and it would not have been a utilitarian building. It would have just been an artifact. And we ended up doing a 3-story, 4-story building in effect, with including the lower level. And it was about the time that the John Hancock building in Boston was having its trouble of all the glass falling out and so forth. And the glass that we used was the one that they ended up using for the final glass in the John Hancock. The intention was to do something a little bit different, but not outrageously, not doing something like a Gehry building. This was not intended to be a self-statement. It was intended to be a part of the cohesion to the whole street. My memory was that the original facade easement program was, each project was going to be limited to like $90,000 or $95,000, something like that. Somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to give you $95,000, you're going to take it. But in effect what happens is, in the facade easement program, you are giving the facade to the city and the redevelopment authority, and they technically own the outside of that building. And I'm almost positive that this was the first time that had been done to this extent. Well, we were selected by the SRA. I've got about 5 projects, and I think Jim Ballou got, another architect, got several of the projects. So Jim got the job to redo the exterior of what they called the Beef and Oyster restaurant. We completely redid that, refinished all the brick and masonry and stone and so forth. And attached to that Beef and Oyster building, it was a brick building, 2-story, was another little bit smaller building, also 2-story and brick. It was in tough shape. It was a bar room. It was the place where all the street people hung around and so forth. It was that was what downtown looked like at the time. And it was still a bar when we finished, because we didn't do the interior. and we just did the exterior. Sort of around the corner on Essex Street, there was the building which was the old custom house. At that one time, that was the waterfront came up, almost up to that area, and that was the custom house, and it was in terrible shape. It had at least 3 or 4 different styles of things that were going on, and all kinds of contemporary things going on. It was in terrible shape. John Emerson, he and I worked together on that. When I was doing the overall envelope, he was passing judgment on it. And we would say, well, no, let's do this, let's do that. We'd help each other. The original building had an eagle which was stored in the Essex Institute on the 2nd floor. So we had a company make a fiberglass copy of it. It's like you gave birth to something, you know, and it's still there. You know, there's this thing that's still there and it's working. And I still look at that and marvel at what it is and how it got there.